well. My wife makes a liniment, which is, my wife's French. So she makes a product that is very simple to make out of lime water and oil and a couple of other products that's very popular in France, but not very popular in North America. And we don't use baby wipes in our house at all. We've cleaned our baby's bums with a cloth and this product for each child that we have. They've never had a rash, never had an issue. That's something we've implemented into our house, maybe because of my wife's background and her culture, but more often, more so because we knew it had a big impact, and the amount of baby wipes you would go through to wipe the baby. That was a really big thing. Other things we've done in the house include disposable diapers and non-disposable diapers. So we don't use disposable diapers. We do sometimes if we have to on occasion, but we try to use non-disposable diapers as much as we can, especially in the house. If we're in the house and we're not going anywhere, for sure. Other elements that we've used in our other elements we've brought into our house, is we use Himalayan nuts to wash our clothing now. We don't use detergent or any soap or powder. We use Himalayan nuts. That's something a product we found that we think's good and we enjoy using it, and it's not overly expensive. It's pretty cheap and something that has a huge impact. We shop a lot more responsibly now in terms of the products we buy. Clothing, really specifically, we try and buy as few clothes as possible. And if we do buy clothing, it's from brands that we trust in some context, or we have some kind of understanding of them trying to do good things in the world. We try and help support those brands, or local brands as well. And then, yeah, there's a bunch of things. It's hard actually when you ask me that question.
Yeah, I know that's loads. Like, you definitely have to share some of those recipes afterwards. Sounds amazing. I wish I knew about that 5 years ago.
Yeah, the liniment is something. If anyone's French online now, like they'll probably know it as just part and parcel of living in France. But in Canada, it's not something. And baby wipes, yeah, horrendous. You know, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough time to try and get plastic free when you've got babies. Okay, so thinking now about so the curbside recycling, so that got a bit, it's a tough one, isn't it? It got a bit of a bashing. And I just wonder, now that you've done that and you've been to a landfill and you've picked through people's rubbish, how do you feel about curbside recycling now? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's very convenient. It's a very effective way of removing people's responsibility of what they consume. It is a very efficient way of taking that from our eyes and from our minds and putting it in somewhere else that we don't see. It's a real shame actually, because it's something that is so nice to have, and the idea of that being taken away from your life is something that is, you couldn't imagine. How dare you make me be more responsible for the products I bring in my house. But so my feelings on that have changed massively, because I found it such a convenient, easy thing for us to kind of use in our household. The biggest thing for us, really, actually, just to build on from that, was, I think I mentioned in the documentary, we got really proud in our house, very, very proud of how much recycling we would create in comparison to the amount we would create for landfill. And I remember being very kind of vocal with my wife of we have a full bin of recycling and we have hardly anything to go to the landfill. Isn't this fantastic? And that, my mind has suddenly been warped on that as well, because recycling isn't equally as good, as good as we might think it is.
Yeah. So I mean, it's almost to say, it can be a bit of a distraction, right? If you think I'm doing so well on recycling, we were talking before, you forget to do the other R's, you forget to reduce and you forget to use, because you just think, oh, I'm recycling, it's fine. And it's it's not, logistically it works, but psychologically it's become a problem because it's distracted us from the bigger prize.
Yeah, exactly. And there's an anonymity to what our waste in our household. I don't know if that's the right word. Sorry, I'm sometimes not very good with it. But I find that what comes into our house, and that idea of curbside recycling that lets us kind of pretty much throw whatever we like in whatever bin we kind of like and no one will ever really know, not even next door, is kind of an awful thing, really, from my perspective.
Yeah. And you talked to someone else about how recycling on the street can be so complicated, like how you have different bins in different municipalities and different labels here and there. Like, is there anything, and there isn't a national framework on that. Like, is there anything happening in that area or?
Yeah, no, it's actually, it just depends on, the municipality and the relationship they have with their recycler and how they set that up and what different facilities take. Yeah, in Squamish, for example, we have, all the bins that we have downtown, that are put out for the public to use. There's no recycling attached to that. So it's a very convenient idea, and they don't want litter all over the street. But the bin that they put out is just kind of go straight to landfill. We actually were there when that got dropped off. We didn't include it in the film because it wasn't necessarily what the point we were trying to make as such. We didn't speak specifically to that point, but we were there when they dropped off all of those bags, and it was incredible. And that was just from 1 week, in a 20,000 population small town like Squamish.
Because there was lots of recycling in it.
There was everything,
Yeah, okay.
Because you walk down the street, and if you have something in your pockets or your hands and there's a bin, people just tend to chuck it in. There's no thought process. So, yeah, it's a scary thing, that lack of framework, actually, federally and regionally, about how it's controlled, and it feels a little bit like a free for all, in a way. The UBC, for example, I don't know if this is in the documentary. I don't think it is, but they don't recycle pizza boxes. So you can't put pizza boxes into the recycling there because the company they use doesn't do that. So, so then you think a lot of students would eat pizza, That would be a common edible source on the university campus, but there's nowhere to put the pizza boxes. So, things like that would just kind of make your mind.
Yeah. Because I was thinking about, I don't know if you've ever been to the aquarium, but they're really good, and they have, they literally have above every bin, every waste stream, they show you exactly the items that can go in there. Obviously, they're pioneers and leaders in it, but it's got to be that clear cut to people, because there's so much wish cycling that goes on and so much guessing, and it's ridiculous how complicated it is, but it is.
Yeah, because there's a freedom of how you can create product design, essentially.
Yeah.
Because if you want to create a product and market your packaging, it's kind of free. You get to do whatever you want. So in that sense, it's trickles down to us to have to then deal with that packaging that's provided to us from the product we buy. But there's not that top level control of how you can package your products, or how you can, to fit into the system lower down. So, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about the microplastics, because you went and you talked to people from Surfrider and the shoreline cleanup, and who are doing an amazing job at picking up all this rubbish and, sifting through all the sand. And so what are organizations like that doing in terms of addressing the source? And is there anything more that consumers can do to address the source on microplastics?
Microplastics are, it's a catch-all term, as Peter Ross mentioned. So it's the, if my fleece is made of plastic and I wash it and those come off in the wash and go down, that essentially those are microplastics just as much as the little packages, pieces of plastic are. But companies like Surfrider and the Great Ocean Shoreline Cleanup are doing amazing work for beach cleanups, amazing work, literally walking up and down beaches whenever they have the chance and picking up the trash. They have an amazing kind of top 10, the dirty dozen they call it. You can go onto the Great Ocean Shoreline Cleanup's website and see this dirty dozen of the things they most commonly find. Things like cigarette butts and all those kinds of things. But the big issue with that is, once again, it's once it breaks down into those smaller pieces, it's so hard to find, and the tide brings it in, but it washes it away. So it's only on the shoreline for periods of time. If you're lucky enough for people to traipse up and down. The microplastics example we give in the documentary, specifically with Surfrider on Vancouver Island, those tiny pellets, I don't know if those are created by manufacturing companies on the Fraser. So for example, even recyclers. So a recycler would take all of our milk bottles and shred it down into make those little pellets. And that's kind of their product of what they then sell to turn into plastic carpets or anything like that. So in that sense, those spillages and what's washing up in Vancouver, on Vancouver Island, those tiny pellets, that's actually being created. That's a product of the plastics industry. So,
so that's just an accident. It's that it gets in the ocean.
They actually have a really great research. They've done a lot of research into this and a lot of investigation into the spillage. So, for example, in those facilities, it's just, you know, a big storage bucket, and there's a funnel, and they're just spraying pellets into a bucket to be covered up and sold. But there's naturally just spillage, and then that gets washed down the drain. So there's been so far they've done a big investigation into that, actually, about how to just even get those manufacturers to have storage drain covers, you know, just on their drains to stop that happening. So there's a lot of ways it can get into our ocean. Someone else told us, sorry, I'm talking a lot, I think it was Tanya from the Great Ocean Shoreline Cleanup, about, you know, the tires, the rubber on our tires when we drive, you know, it's left on the road. That's why your tires you need to get new tires. But that rubber gets washed into the ocean, you know, the amount of cars on the road and going through tires. So there's lots of different examples of microplastics.
How that happens. Yeah, I read about that the other day, and there's some gadget that someone's created that grabs it off your wheel apparently now. But anyway, okay, so I'm just going to ask one more question, then pass it over to Celine. I just wanted to pick up on this this concept of zero waste. It was like a little snippet that someone said at the end, which I thought was really interesting, that zero waste has sort of become almost like an elitist target in your house, and people strive to zero waste when actually perhaps in our homes it isn't possible. We do need to live with some plastic, but I don't know. I wonder what you thought of that. Like, I thought it was really interesting that sort of, it's set up as this almost unachievable target that people hold themselves accountable to.
Yeah. Tanya mentioned that as well. That it's kind of a system in a sense that's set up to fail, not for everybody if they live a certain lifestyle that can live zero waste. I mean, we talked to a lot of people that are doing their best and have even tried it. So Tanya, for example, did a year. She tried a year to live zero waste. And then landed up not living zero waste, but trying to change things. I think that's more of an approach that I can kind of relate to, especially with young kids. We try and do our best, but zero waste is quite an intimidating subject for a lot of people. And that's not to say that community is anyway doing anything wrong. They are what we're all trying to get to. But the pressure that it's either zero waste or not is something that I think is unfair for people. So yeah, Tanya said that very beautifully.
Yeah, tricky at an individual level, but then hopefully achievable at a community level, if we have the municipal 100%. Support to do the right thing.
100%. We clothing wise, for example, now, not that we're zero waste, but we get all of our clothing. Squamish, I'm not sure it's like on the North Shore, but Squamish has an amazing secondhand community Facebook chat groups from parents that literally either sell for very low prices or give away their clothing to anyone else from the community who needs it for their children. And in that case, we're not purchasing anything for our kids, clothing wise. We're getting pretty much everything we can from the community, which is incredible for us.
Yeah, it's great. We have stuff like that here in North Van. It's awesome. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Celine. I've got one tiny question. How did you get the bear in the movie? That's great casting.
Yeah, it's great. The poor bear, actually, it was that, if you want to know the specifics of that interaction exactly, is we literally pinned it between the river and us, and so the poor thing didn't know what to do. So that's
you weren't trying to get him in?
No, not at all. We were just walking along, but it wasn't look off in the distance, there's a beautiful black bear. It was like we had pinned it was a juvenile black bear down near the inlet, just in the Squamish Inlet, and it's quite a common place for juveniles to go to find lots of salmon berries in the summer. So you can bump into, we don't take our dog down there off a leash, for example. You do bump into bears a lot. But yeah, we did. It was a shame. You could totally read what the bear was going through, of like, go this way. Oh, there's a river. Oh, wait, I'll go up a tree. Oh, there's trees. Oh, okay. No, it was a very cute interaction.
It was good. All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass over to Celine.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lorna. And there was a mention earlier talking about community and exchanging goods in the community and how that's helpful for kids. There's actually a mention of buy nothing groups, Facebook groups, if anybody is on Facebook. And the one in Vancouver is pretty strong. And there's a few others. So buy nothing group on Facebook I guess is a good alternative. I'm going to switch gear a little bit and talk about the clothing industry. And the first burning question I had, I also saw pop in the comments here, which is, tell us about your filter. Your filter that catches microplastics. How is it? Is it working? Is it worth it? How did that change what you see coming out of your washes now?
So yeah, it's made by Environmental Enhancements, I think the company is called. I'll confirm that and send that across to everybody. So this was the filter that Peter Ross and his team were using at Oceanwise for their study they're doing currently on the microfibers that come out of our washing. So I purchased the same filter that they had for their study. It was roughly $150. From a company, but from my research, the company is not a big company. It's just a few people making this product. But I took the word of Oceanwise that this was the best filter they could find. In terms of its usage, it's a little too early to kind of grasp its effectiveness. But what I can tell you is that we empty it probably once every 2 weeks, and it is disgusting. It is not an enjoyable process. It's the lint that you would get in your dryer, but just wet and has been sat there for a week. So there's a smell to it. And from what Anna told us at Oceanwise, there was actually filters in washing machines originally a couple of decades ago, but they were taken out because of customer complaints, essentially because of the smell that was created from that. So from our perspective, what we use it for now, we 100% are so glad that we have it. We empty it once every 2 weeks, and it's a lot that comes out. I would say maybe a handful of like about this much of lint comes out that you could kind of squeeze into a small handful. The complexity though that we are in now, which I haven't yet confirmed with Anna, is what we do with that ball. Now we have that ball, because now I have that ball in my hands and I'm kind of don't know where to put it. So we have a little pile of them on our shelf in our house of not knowing exactly what to do with that, because it could be plastic, it could be any kind of fabric that comes with it. So I suppose the best thing I would suggest is, buy as much organic, as much natural, as much hemp as you can in terms of clothing, and then
natural fibers, which was an interesting topic in the documentary, seeing how it's become a bit of a luxury item nowadays to go with that, and there's a little bit of a price tag associated to it. Talking about that, so we know there's generally speaking good clothing and bad clothing. The bad one being there's microplastics and it's not natural fibers and it goes into our oceans. And companies have a choice as well in terms of how they make the clothing. So what, in very short kind of overview, what makes good clothing company? What are you looking for when you make a choice of a company you will buy from?
That's a very good question. Ideally, not a company that's answering to shareholders and that profit kind of margin they have to get. I don't want to diss Lululemon. I worked there for 2 years and I did a lot of good stuff there, and I'm very proud of the time. And I know a lot of great people that work there. But when I worked there, we were getting told to do things called weeklies. And at that time when the creative team was a really exciting time to make a lot of content about these week products. But then when I stood back and realized they're making new products on a weekly basis, and they're promoting new things on a weekly basis, it did change my idea of that company in some context and what they wanted for the planet. Once again, I own Lululemon clothing, so I'm not, and they're local. So in that context, they're local. But what I look for in terms of that is natural fibers. Not looking for profit margins. Companies that you have some kind of understanding of. Do the research of the company or the organization. we do feel sometimes elitist. We do buy Patagonia, and that's not to say that Patagonia is the best organization on the planet either. In any kind of, when you're making anything, it's hard to be the best company, but we use these piece of clothing as like an investment in our future. So I get super excited about this clothing, for example, because I can pass this on to my daughter and my son. That's our family's plan. So we, you know, in 20, 25 years, my daughter or son will have, you know, a retro Patagonia fleece top that they can wear, you know, and hopefully, and that's really cool to them in 25 years. It might not be, it might be a complete waste, but it's something that I feel a kind of personal investment in my future in that way. And I get excited about that possibility of passing that on to my kids. So it's up to you, but we are way more thoughtful about it now.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you. I'm sure our friends will ask her, where did you get that from?
Yeah, it's a hard one because we get a lot of kids clothes. I'm not sure about, especially Christmas time. So we have to like talk our mums and dads off that, you know, please don't send us more clothing, you know, please, they don't need it, and it's hard to stop that because it's so cute, it looks so cute, and it's like, okay, but
that's it, cheaply made, looking cute, and couldn't resist is what people tell you when they bring you something in the house.
Exactly.
But talking about it's cheap, it's cute, it's made far away, and it degrades very quickly, as you've done 2 washes. Where is the responsibility from the clothing company in that? So can we talk a little bit more about what you shared in the documentary on EPR, the concept of end product responsibility, which seems to be quite a big problem in the clothing industry. With the conversations you've had, can you tell us a little bit more about what you understand of it and what kind of solutions we may see popping up for that industry?
Yeah, so it's extended producer responsibility.
Oh,
so it's the idea of, that's okay, it's the idea of how producers should be responsible for the products that they create. And it's kind of the textile industry, it's non-existent really, unfortunately, at the moment. It's kind of, if me and you wanted to go out and make a clothing company together tomorrow, we could source our product from wherever we want, textile material, our design, and then sell it. And as soon as it's sold, it's kind of not our problem anymore. And that's the issue that's currently facing in the textile industry, is how they can control that, because it's such a global industry in a lot of contexts. So you're getting lots of different things from different places. So it's very difficult for a government body to oversee and tell different countries what to do. You'd have to unite a lot of different countries in order to make that happen. So a lot of different people are trying to bring the product closer to home, you know, wherever you are in the world, to make it a more local product, which is really difficult, because it's difficult to find the people with the skills in some areas, the materials that you need. And so it is a more expensive way of making clothes, which makes it a more expensive product at the end of the day. But yeah, extended producer responsibility in the textile industry is a big issue. Something that I actually am feeling very passionate about, and something that I think I would like to make another documentary on that just focuses on that, with the chance to try and change something from a federal level, or at least at a provincial level, about that. Because I think, you know, Arc'teryx said it the best when they were just saying, like, the biggest thing we're responsible for is our hang tags, you know, in terms of the clothing they produce, which is mind blowing, you know. And it's up to the company if they want responsibility for that product or not. It's not, there's no obligation to, you know.
Yeah,
which makes my heart pound as I speak about it. I get very annoyed about that stuff.
Absolutely. Now, this is prompting a ton of questions for me, which is good. Actually, you went in the direction I wanted to go into. So you were just talking about how it's difficult because you have these different countries and governments which have different legislations, and how do you coordinate everything? So can we talk a minute about politicians, and looking into this being a documentary that's made locally, and you know, some people recognize the faces you've talked to. I didn't see much politicians' faces in there. Was that deliberate, or did you have reluctance from politicians to talk to this documentary? How did that come up?
So we did interview George Heyman, who's the environmental minister for BC. The reason that wasn't included in the documentary was because we felt that the interview didn't have a casual kind of conversational approach to it, and it didn't feel like we got answers from that interview that felt like they would be beneficial for people to hear in some context. The interview was taking place in a park in the height of COVID. You know, George didn't see us. He came in a mask. We were all wearing masks. It was very from a distance. It was in 10 minutes. There was no time to really kind of get to the depth of what we were trying to talk about. So we have that interview actually. We didn't include it in the documentary. George's answers were great, but they were just what you would kind of expect, and it didn't really. We didn't feel that it pushed our story forward. It kind of felt to us that when we put it in the edit, it kind of just halted what we were trying to talk about, because we felt like a lot of people have heard that before. But I definitely don't think the politicians are trying to do anything bad in terms of what they're trying to do. He's very much for the environment. He's very much trying to do as best as he can in this world that he exists in to try and make change. And obviously understands that world far better than I do. So that's why it wasn't included. But yeah, it was an interesting conversation. It just didn't make the cut, unfortunately, as in many interesting conversations in the process of making the documentary.
Yeah, super. Thank you. So trying to regroup questions around a sequel and what might come up next. So I heard one thing here with EPR, extended product responsibility, that you're really passionate about. I would love to see something focused on that. So would love to know if you think that's actually coming. And there's also some ideas for you of documentaries. One being the waste that is still disposed of at sea, with thinking that the majority of folks really don't understand how much of the world still does that and how we're just shipping off content into sea. And related to that, how are we doing in Vancouver? So thinking about our microplastic fibers, and with your talks with OceanWise, how is the filtration system right now when in our waste treatment plants, for example? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so once again, a very interesting conversation we had with Surfrider about the plant. Oh, I'm so sorry, the name escapes me. It's next to the airport. There's a big treatment facility right next to the airport, just on the north side of the airport, down where the dog beach is. I don't know if anyone's been that way. And that was introduced to us by Surfrider as something that has, it's what they would call it, there's 3 levels. So it's level 1 for the filtration systems is around 60%. It gets about 60% of the microplastics or plastics that go through. And then the second level is about 80%, and it will save about 80 to 85% of the plastics go through. And then the top level 3, I believe, and this is again from a conversation I had a month ago, so I am paraphrasing a little bit, and if anyone wants to, please do so. But that gets about 98% of the microfibers that go through. And even that is, 2% is still quite a large amount. But that plant, exactly, the city has just upgraded to a level 2, but not a level 3. So they're changing that entire, which has been around since I think the 60s, that treatment facility, which only stops about 60%. They're upgrading it to a level 2. So there's still a lot of work to be done from the city's perspective of actually greener city, let's do it, let's go level 3 and let's pay the money for, and let's make sure it is the top notch it can be. But I believe that is the case. And that was from an interesting conversation we had with Surfrider. Once again, this comes from a conversation I had a couple months ago. So please don't take that by gospel, but if you want to look into that further, it's a really interesting upgrade that they're doing down there.
Okay, Great, thank you. Thanks for the information. I'm looking at the time, and I want to make sure we have also enough time to open it up for questions. I captured a few that I saw in the chat. I'll just have one more questions, and then I'll open it to the floor and see if there's any follow-up questions or anything else that hasn't been addressed. And you feel free to unmute yourself and speak up. We'd love to hear your lovely voices. Or feel free to pop your question in the chat. Before I open it up, the very last one I have was, what was fun? What did you enjoy most, Stuart, into making this documentary and going on to this big adventure? What was the best part of this journey?
I had my child throughout the journey, so I can't say anything different than that. I'm not sure that was fun, but that was a really big part of our lives, is having our second child in that middle of that. The most fun from a filming perspective, or what I enjoy really in my job and what I do, is the learning process and the educational process I go through, and meeting everybody that I meet. I was really, really excited about the psychology behind why we all crave convenience. And actually, once again, we have a lot of interviews that talk specifically about that. And that didn't make it into the cut either, because it felt like it was too broad, too nuanced or too specific. But I really enjoyed that part of it, trying to understand the psychology behind the idea of convenience. We had a whole interview with a neuroscientist about like how we're so dissimilar to rats. You know, rats and humans are basically the same thing, minus, you know, the size of brains. And we had, you know, an hour conversation about how we're the same as rats. And I loved that whole interview and that whole idea, and that didn't make the cut. So there was lots of fun, enjoyable moments, but educating myself was really enjoyable.
Okay. Great, thank you so much. Thank you. I will pause there and see if either Lorna or see we have Josh joined us as well in the team. Marianne have any further questions, or if there's any other questions from our attendees here that we haven't addressed.
I have a question, if I can. Hi, Stuart. I hope I'm not stealing the thunder from anyone else. Yeah. Okay, I see some other questions, so I'll keep it brief. My question is, what are your thoughts with regards to the proposed plastics legislation that's just been put forward and it's now open for public consultation?
In terms of, sorry, say that again.
Jonathan Wilkinson's office has proposed a, well, it is a very lengthy word, but basically it's a plastics ban, and there's 6 items on that list. And there's a whole system proposed around it. Have you looked into that?
No, I haven't, so I will do
okay.
now.
Yeah,
I will look into that.
You have until tomorrow to respond.
Okay. But yeah, in terms of any plastics ban, I think that's incredible. If the if that can be implemented, for sure.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of criticism on it, because it's a very restricted list that's being proposed, that's being put forward, and there's again a lot of emphasis on recycling. But there's also talk about the extended
producer responsibility.
Yes, exactly. So that's the good news.
It was funny, it was funny, just to talk about something slightly different in relation to that, was we talked to the Squamish district about how much the municipality can have control over those types of things. And it was very interesting to hear from the restrictions that the municipalities are under, of how much control they have over plastic waste and what they can ban and what they can't ban. And it was very restricted. The reason, I think you might know this or may not know this, but the reason that plastic bags are able to be banned is because they're part of the process that gets from the store to you, so the interaction. So they can control that municipality, but they can't control anything inside the store. Brianna from NADA told us that, you know, there's nothing legal that can stop you from taking your own containers into any store to fill up your own goods. And even though like hygiene and all that is talked about, it's not actually illegal for you to do that. It's up to the store if they want you to or not. But like, so it's really up to the private organization.
I see a lot of questions actually popping up around the plastics ban proposal. So we'll throw some information into the chat where you can find more information about that.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Ladies, back to you.
Sorry, I didn't answer that question. I will,
no, but you have some homework to do tonight, I guess. So
yeah, exactly.
So go on.
Please, no, go ahead, Lorna.
I was just going to say, so there's a good quick one here. So Jasmine was asking, are you going to keep up with mending your clothes? How's that going?
Yeah, for sure. So that's actually something we've brought into the house as well, and darning our socks. Trying to. It's funny. We were darning our socks. We actually quite enjoy sitting across the table from each other. It's actually a really nice time for my wife and I to chat. Once the kids are in bed, we just kind of sit there and do it. But yeah, we will. The stains for sure. I can't count the amount of clothes I've gone, oh, it's got a stain, we've got to get rid of it. And the fact that it just put a patch on it and it's fine, you know, like that is huge. And we'll do that. And for our kids as well, you know, throughout their whole childhood, for sure. We'll just put a patch on it. But yeah, we will. Sounds
good. And then, so Holden was asking, you know, is there going to be any follow-up after your documentary? Like, is there a website, or like, what do you hope will happen after this?
With the documentary itself, we're hoping schools. So that's the idea of the documentary. So CBC have it for a year. That's the kind of broadcast license that they've purchased from us. And so after that, our plan is to try and get it into education as much as we can. If anyone has any help for distribution within education, we'd appreciate it. But that is our intention. As I mentioned, I have a talk tomorrow it was shown at a local secondary school here in Squamish, and we have a talk tomorrow morning with 500 students. And I think that is a really impactful way of getting the message out there. So that's our intention.
Oh, cool. So that's like something you're actively trying to do, is show it in schools and then go and do a talk and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with Zoom and what's happened this year, it's an easy way to kind of have those conversations.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for doing that. Kind of starting awareness at the source in the young years, and not taking bad habits, and knowing where you have your power as a consumer from the get-go is probably easier than trying to correct years or decades of convenience. On that, one of the questions I see is related to how much is actually recycled, and I think that was about 9%, if I remember. So what do you tell people who say it really doesn't matter, I can put everything in the trash because there's so little being recycled? What do you say to that? How do you address people?
If people, I would that saddens me a lot, because that's our responsibility, and therefore if we recycle, we are doing what is provided to us by the system that's in place, and we should do that. That's our responsibility. If you don't think it's worth it, that's a real shame. But yeah, I would say this, just don't. If for our kids, you know, just do as much as you can to make as little go into our landfill as possible, as little. And from what I saw at my local landfill, that is literally a kilometer away from me, not even, is atrocious. The amount of stuff that could have been recycled that isn't and that's in that's in BC. That's here. That's in a place that really seems to care, or you know, we put it out there that we care about the environment. So that's really important that we don't do that. I would suggest to anyone.
Yeah. So then, circling on, what can we all do after having seen the documentary and having had a chat? And I think that's a question I already know the answer, because we talked a little bit about that just before everybody joined in. But if you were to advise people on what they can do, what would be the top action? So I'm hearing, think about what you bring in your house is one.
Yeah, huge. It's not. That is for a homeowner or a parent or anyone. It's not thinking about how do we get rid of this stuff. It's a mental switch. Once it's in a house, what do we do with it? But think about it before it goes into the house. Just think about it before it comes in. That's the biggest thing I would suggest. That's a really easy switch. You know, and you're in the supermarket and you're thinking about, you know, even down to, you know, are the eggs in a plastic box or are they in a paper box? You know, whatever it is, just those simple thought processes really, really help everything. You know, the example we give in the documentary is on yogurt pots. You know, if people buy those single-use yogurt pots, or you just buy one big jug of yogurt, you know, and you can reuse that it's just that very simple switch. And don't feel the pressure to try and change everything in your life, because it's not, it could be possible, but don't put that pressure on yourself to be perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For those eating dairy and who have an Instant Pot in their house, my husband makes his yogurt using his Instant Pot.
There you go.
So yeah,
exactly.
well, there's still milk he has to buy, and that's in a plastic jug. So it's never super perfect, but everybody tries. So I guess what I'm hearing as well is there's just so many things we can all do, and it doesn't have to be big changes, but being very conscious and doing things, starting with things that are easier, we're more comfortable with, and then kind of shredding a little bit that convenience with that raised awareness. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing and all from one day to the next.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, don't feel that pressure for sure. I just saw I just popped the chat open because I realized this is what was going on. I was like, I just saw someone plastic tree or real tree. I got a real tree, but we treat our tree differently. We actually, my wife not got annoyed at me initially when I started to do this, but I actually buy the tree and then we keep it for as long as we can. We've not made it the full year yet, so the intention for us is to buy a tree and try and keep it. So we keep it in the corner of the house, take all the decorations off, and then keep watering it. The last one we had made it to the summertime until it got zapped by the sun, the way our house faces. But we have a real tree that we try and keep, and it's not, I'm not saying that's the right way to do it or the wrong way to do it. That's what we do.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'm seeing tips on the milk, so thanks everyone. I will tell my dairy eating husband about that. I'll pass it over to Lorna and Marian. There's a lot of questions coming in, so and we have 10 minutes, so feel free to just point out to questions that you think would be good next topics.
Yeah, so there's one more here. So what are your thoughts about some of the clothing companies or like IKEA taking back items? Like IKEA starting to do that take back system, aren't they? Do you think that's sort of genuine? Is it a publicity stunt or?
Yeah, of course it's a way to make you buy more things in a way. Of course it is. It's a business. To unfortunately think that everything comes from such a genuine place of love and care. I mean, it could be, but it's a great thing, and it should be the way it always is. It should 100% have been, and I don't know why it hasn't been for so long, of if you finish with your pair of Nike trainers, you can take it back to Nike and just give them the trainers back and say, there you go. And they do something with it, and that should be the system. Not speaking about Nike specifically, but any company that sells you a product should, in my opinion, help take that back or dispose of it correctly.
Mm-hmm. And then, so there's one more question here about, do you feel that that local government is leaning on other places in the world? So Europe's sort of way ahead in terms of recycling and packaging and regulations and landfill diversion. Do you get a sense that BC is looking for solutions, or that they're trying to sort of follow the rest of the world and catch up?
It's a good question.
Yeah, okay. It's a big question.
It's a big question. I do know that there's a lot of more population in Europe, so they have to control that with a lot more rigor and a lot more oversight, because it's just so many people living in such a small place. In Canada, we're here with this, feels as though there's so much space for us to grow into, so that's a big consideration. I think that there are a lot of people doing great things around the world, and it's important for government to take note if a country is doing something really well and bring it back to us here. I think that's super important. But the one thing I would say about Vancouver or BC, from my perspective, and maybe a few other people's perspectives, I came here because I was just in awe of the beauty and the wilderness and the wild and how big and amazing this place is. And I feel very passionate that in the lifetime that I have here, having moved from Europe, that I help do as much as I can in whatever capacity I have to maintain that. And that was really inspirational. to hear from the Haida community just about the philosophy that they have. You know, just a simple thing of, this is speaking to wilderness, or I'm just going slightly off topic and I'm sorry if I am, but just in that community, how at a young age, every child is given an animal, spirit animal. It's their animal. They have to like do everything they can to protect that animal. And I just thought that was incredible. I was like, why haven't I? So now me and my wife are planning that for our kids. You know, we will give them an animal that they will have to look after their whole life, and we'll hold them to that and make sure that they, you know, do that, because it's important, super important to care about where you live.
Yeah,
and yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, it was really inspirational.
Okay, so I'll finish up with one last question on that thought, and then I'll hand over to Josh to sort of wrap us up for the evening. So just sort of linking to that, it was really lovely at the end of the film when you talked to your parents and they kind of, you know, reflected on what was parenting was like in their days. And, you know, let's be honest, this wasn't on the agenda for most of our parents, for people in our generation. And now, you know, this is what For Our Kids is all about. Like, we're trying to say that taking care of the planet and being responsible with waste is part of parenting. So I just wanted to hear, you know, what are your thoughts on that, and sort of how well established do you think that is as a thought? Like, is that a kind of slightly out there thought, or is it starting to become more embedded across parents?
Yeah, good question. From my parents' generation, I understand what they needed, and I understand their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, post World War II, you know, council estates in Scotland. Dad is in the Navy by 16, mum a midwife by 16, and that was it for life. And you know what I mean? Like, that was just their upbringing. So I know that all they wanted for us as kids was to have us to be comfortable. And then that was, you know, if we spoke to my mum now in terms of her life, she'll say, as long as I die. You know, she said, I'm going to get emotional, but I don't want to. But, you know, she didn't get anything from her parents, like nothing.
Yeah.
And so she wants to leave her kids with something. And that, for my mum, is financial, you know, whether that's a house or whatever that is to her, that's what she wants. So for our generation, I feel, and especially living in a place like BC, which is a place that has lots of opportunity. I think that for our kids to make sure I protect the environment for them as much as I can, or make an awareness for them, I feel very proud about that. I don't know if that's spread across my generation, our generation of parents. I don't know. I hope that it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I know everyone has their own struggles and their own things they deal with in life. So I don't want to put any burden on any other person if they have different goals and aspirations of what they want to achieve in their life. But for my wife and I, we feel very strongly about that, and passionate about that, for sure.
Thank you, Stuart. There's lots of praise if you open the chat, and thankful comment for you for making such a beautiful documentary. So thank you for sharing your talent and your passion.
No, thank you all. Thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
And I think we'll leave it to Geoff to give us a little closing.
Yes, yeah, just first a quick follow-up on what Marion had mentioned. We just actually sent a letter to the federal government in response to the proposed integrated management approach on plastics. And we do also hope to do more of this. If anybody's interested in getting involved on this, please let us know. And I just inserted our email in the chat box. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We'd love to get any feedback we can. We're interested to learn how you found the format and the content tonight. If you have any ideas or requests for future topics, or if you want to get more involved, let us know. And as I mentioned, I included the email address in the chat box. Also, we will follow up with an email regarding the session tonight and ways to become involved. So you can also reply to that email. And please, if you want to hear about our next events, you can go to the North Shore For Our Kids webpage and add your email address through the I'm in button. And it's really helpful if you do this, as it gives us a bit more information about how involved you want to be, and puts you straight on our mailing list. And I would like to remind you all that our next monthly meeting will be on January 19th. And our guest speaker is going to be Sandy Goldie, who I think is actually on the call tonight. Sandy Goldie and Jim Bronson for Project Drawdown. So that's going to be on January 19th. We hope you'll join us for that. And thanks again to Stuart for his talk today. and for everyone for joining us. So we'll see you next time.